Hey guys, welcome to week 3 of Fusion 360 in Design 121. So for today, we are going to be looking at some more, just a little bit more in depth at sketching, a couple of the additional features that you can do inside of there, as well as some of the basic 3D tools and how those kind of play in with the sketches. So for starters, we're going to be doing a sketch, and this sketch I'm going to be doing on what is I'm going to call my front plane here, or the XZ plane here. So I'm going to start by selecting that plane and then selecting create a sketch, and it will bring up my create here. And I've got an image in my book in front of me that I'm going to be basing this off of. So again, like I've told you before, I usually like to just, if it's something that's symmetrical, I like to throw down a construction line. And that's going to be just like that with the construction option here over on the right. And I'm going to go ahead before I get all the way into this. There's a couple of the other features here that I did not talk about, which is filling, offsetting, trimming, and extending, and how these kind of work. So I am going to demonstrate those before I get too far into my drawing here. And so the first one we'll talk about is fillet. And so what fillet does is this is when, I'll go ahead and turn my construction off, when I have two lines that are meeting at a 90-degree corner there like so, or even if they're not meeting at a 90 degree and it's something at a slightly different angle like so, and I would like to round that off. A fillet is what that you can see there in that illustration. A fillet applies a rounded arc in between these two lines. So if I click that tool, and I can either select the point, and you can see there the red that shows up is illustrating what's going to occur, and same thing there. Or I can select one line and a second line, and it will do the same thing. I can select one line and a second line. And if you notice there, before I click away, it actually gives me an option here to alter that radius. And you can see here that these two are currently connected to the same value. So I'll go ahead and just make that 20. And I'll just click, if I click outside here, it won't do anything. If I right click and hit OK, it'll finish that. And now if I type in 15, it'll adjust both of them. And you can see there that it's now actually created a new line entity there. So I have a straight line, a curved line, and another straight line. Same thing over here. So the fillet is actually creating a new line, and it automatically makes it tangent to your existing lines and then assigns it a value there. So it's basically automatically doing a bunch of things that you could do manually, but it would take a lot longer. Something to note there, again, if I were to do, let's say I have two different corners and I want them to be two different values. How you would go about doing that is you would fillet the first one, and then again, you can right click and click OK. Then I would go back to the fillet command and do a second one at a different value, right click, click OK. And then that way I now have two separate values, and you can see I've got two different dimensions calling out for those. So that's how you do that. There is also, no, I guess not. Okay, I was just checking to see that sometimes they have a chamfer option as well, but not in this case. So what is an offset? An offset, let's say I take my square like this, and I want to fillet all the corners. So I'm going to select all of them, and I'm going to hit OK. And I want an offset of this line. I can hit the offset tool, and then you'll see the little command part pop up over here where it's asking for my inputs. It wants to know what sketch curves I want to add to that. Chain selection means that if I unselect that, notice how just one line highlights. And if I hit chain selection, it selects everything that is connected to that in a chain. So I can click that, and again, it's shown in red what my outcome is going to be. and I can offset either on the outside or the inside. And I can use this, click and drag. Let's say I want to eyeball it first. So I'm like, okay, I want something that's a little bit more like that. And then I can clean up my number so it's a little bit more reasonable to deal with. So 3mm sounds good. I'll hit enter, which is another way of completing that command. And now I have offset that curve exactly on the inside. And this works with any sort of shape. So even if I draw something that looks like this, and I hit the offset, select that, you'll notice here that it again will offset it exactly as before. So it's a super nifty tool. You will find yourself using it a lot. So good to know how that works. And you can also go back in and adjust that offset after the fact. So I can go in there and add 2. If I wanted to actually make this one 2, I could go in and edit that and it'll adjust it. Now notice if I were to say delete this line here, and because I wanted to add some other feature in here, it does break that offset. So now this is all free to move here, at least in some regards. So these here still seem to be somewhat okay. Yeah, that one's all right. But these ones definitely are not. So I would have to add some more constraints in order for these to actually cooperate and behave a little bit more like it was doing before. So yeah, you can see how that can get a little messy. So you want to make sure before you do an offset that you've kind of got your geometry figured out. If for some reason you do have to add something after the fact, you will just have to define your geometry with sketches and constraints, or sorry, dimensions or constraints in order to get that to settle in. Okay, so that's offsetting. And trimming. Trimming is another important one. So let's say I draw something like this and like this, because I want just these little half moon shapes at the top here, here and here, but I don't want any of this middle part. I can click the trim button, click with my left mouse button and drag, and it will slice away anything that my mouse passes over, like so. So I'm gonna go ahead and make one of those classic crazy mosaics that we so often do. And again, I can just take that trim, say I don't want that, 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 don't want those, don't want that, and there we go. Now I've got a new odd shaping logo thing. Anyways, it's super straightforward. All you're doing again is just clicking, dragging, and it's anywhere that the lines are intersecting that it can cut. So a very simple example of that is, here's one line, here's another line, and where you drag, it will trim. And you can also see here, the click dragging is the quick way of doing it, but you can also select the lines one by one, and the purple will show you what's being cut, and the blue is showing you what will stay, just for future reference as well. So I'm just going to delete all that. Extend is another one that's used frequently. My favorite example of doing something like an extend is to make a curve like so, which we haven't really talked about these sort of curves yet, but we'll get there in just a second. And if I have a line that's like here, and I want this line to intersect here, and let's just say for example's sake that I've got this already dimensioned where I want that to be, and I've got my angle figured out, but in order to get this line, and notice how I'm kind of dragging it and it's giving me a little bit of grief here, what you can actually do is just do a modify extend and extend that. And then you see that the first time it extends it all the way up to this construction line here. And if I highlight it again, it'll extend it all the way until it runs into this curve here. And you can see that it's already given it a coincident there. Now the nice thing about extending is it extends the line. It doesn't add to it with an additional line. Because the other way that I could have done that is, let's say I was back here, I could have taken another line and drawn it, and then taken those two and made them collinear, so they're traveling along the same path. Then I could have selected that and made them coincident. But now I've got two lines and I have that point there, and it took a lot more work to get that to work. So instead, all you need to do is just do modify, extend, and extend the line, and it'll go all the way until it runs into something. Same thing down here. If I do extend, you'll see there that it runs all the way up until it runs into that. And then again, it'll go all the way until it runs into there. And this time, because it's a curve, it's still applying that kind of curved tangency to it, which is pretty nifty. So you will also find that you use extend quite a bit. So breaking is where you can basically cut a segment that is overlapping into multiple entities. So to demonstrate that, I'll go ahead and do an example very similar to the one that they were showing, which is if we have something like this, and we'll go ahead and just copy their example there. And I'm going to do break, and you can see there the little X mark that shows up. So I'm gonna click that and click that. And notice it looks like nothing's changed, but in reality we've gone from 1 to 2 curves now. So we have this one on the outside, and you can see the endpoints stop right there and right there, and then the inside one. So this is another way, if for some reason I wanted these to be two separate entities, I've now split them so they are no longer a part of one contiguous line. They are now two separate line segments. Okay, and the last one in here that we're going to talk about is sketch scale. And so this is a way of scaling your sketch geometry by a specific size. So for example, if I were to have created something that is so big, and I do a sketch scale, and I'd say the entities I want to scale are all of these, and the point I want to scale reference to is just going to pick a corner. And then you can see here that I can enter in a scale factor, or I can drag this to see how big that's going to go. And in this case, I'll just go 2. Now notice it deletes my dimensions that I had before, so I'll have to reconstrain it with dimensions. However, you'll notice that the value is double what it was before. So again, the reason why you would do something like this is if you have created a nice complicated sketch, and then you decide, oh shoot, I actually want to make this bigger, you can actually scale that whole sketch up with just that modify command there. Okay, so that covers the additional modifying tools that we have here. Other things that we didn't really talk about over here on the create side, we talked about our lines, our standard rectangles, and our circles. There are some more options here on the drop down. So we talked about the initial ones that were up here, as well as mirroring across lines here, which I will use in a little bit here. But besides that, under each one of these little options here, you've got a little flyout that gives you more options here. So two-pointed rectangle is where you click one point at the corner and a second point at the corner. A 3-point is where I can actually create a rectangle that is not flat relative to our grid system. So it allows you to create a rotated. Without that, I would have to go in and delete these constraints and figure out how to rotate that with a different set of commands. So it's just easier to use the 3-point rectangle. A center rectangle will allow you to click the center of where you want the rectangle to start, and then you can see here that it has those lines going through it that are constraining how that rectangle is maintaining its shape there. So it's basically the center and then another point. And at any time while I'm doing these commands here, if you already noticed this, over here on my sketch palette, I actually have the ability to change mid option to a different rectangle. So I can click that to start and then change my mind and switch to another one. If I do like the 3 rectangle and I've got 2 lines in and I click another one, it's going to do the same thing, and it's going to back me out and start me over with a different one. So this just gives you the ability, if you start a rectangle and you're like, oh shoot, I actually want to do the 3, you can just quickly come over here, click 3 point, and then do your 3 point rectangle. As for circles, same sort of thing here. We've got a center diameter, a 2 point, a 3 point, a tangent circle, and a 3 tangent circle. So 2 point, 3 point, I'm not going to go over because those are pretty self-explanatory. Tangent circle basically just means if I've got 2 lines here and I want to create a circle that is a 2 tangent circle, I can click one line and click the second line, and what it'll do is it'll make sure that the circumference of that circle is always tangent to those 2 lines, so that it always stays within there if that is my end goal. And that works with all sorts of 2 line situations, and then of course the 3 line is just using 3 lines instead of 2 lines if you're trying to fill a circle in some sort of gap. So those are good to know for that. Arcs are super important. You will use these a lot. 3 point, center, and tangent will all be used quite regularly. So the way that these kind of work, it just depends on the scenario of what information you are given based on the drawing. So with a 3 point arc, what that means is if I know where this side is and I know where this side is, but I have no idea where the center of the arc is or how tall the arc is, what I can do is I can do a 3 point arc. I guess I would have to know how tall the center is, but you can select your starting point, your ending point, and then you can enter in whatever your radius is, or in this case, I can actually just make these tangent and those tangent, and then if this had a value here, that would more or less define that, like so. Should be pretty stuck there now. Yep. So that's the 3 point. And then a center point would be in the case of, let's say I had something like this, where I know the center line and I know where that center point is located. I can actually create the arc based on where the center of it is, then pick a start point of the arc. So I'm going to start to the left, and then I can draw however much of the arc I need. So it might only be 90, or in this case 87.6, because I didn't draw a straight line. So I can make those horizontal to one another. And again, the way that I'm doing these constraints, if you want a quick reminder, is I'm holding Control and I'm selecting 2 points and making those vertical, just like so. And then you can see there that it wants to know how big it's supposed to be. So I'm going to hit 200. Okay, so the center point, again, it wants to know the center point first, then a start point, and an end point. So that works differently than this one because it is a start point, end point, and radius. Okay, so those are 2 different types of arcs. And then the third type of arc is a tangent arc. And the way that this one works is if I have a line like so, and I grab the tangent arc and I click this here, notice how my arc is already showing, and the thing that's important is it's already assigning a tangent mate from where this is intersecting with this line here. So then therefore you can see right there I've got the tangency, and therefore it will throw the end point where I click, and the center point, it doesn't really matter where that ends up because right now it's basing it off of the tangency there. So those are all just kind of the different arcs there. Polygons, these, I don't use these very much, but they are here and they basically just allow you to create polygons quickly. Ellipses, you'll use these a lot. Again, these are sort of like circles, but they're more elliptical. So it asks you for a height and a width or vice versa, however you want to do it. Or you can do it sideways, like so. And again, just feel free to play with these and just get used to how it works with each one of these different things here. Not every exercise and example is going to be using every single one of these, but they're just good to know. So slots, these are something that I use in my day job a lot, but I don't know if I used them that much when I was doing design work in school, but however, they are still good to know. Slots basically just look like this. It's a half arc there, straight line, arc, and it's usually is tangent, 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 tangent. These are parallel, and then it comes with a dotted center line. And the most basic way of creating those is just a center to center, where you know where one center of the arc is supposed to be and the center of the other, and then your third click is determining how big that slot is. And of course you can always go back and dimension everything differently, but just in terms of how big it's asking in the initial part, that's just how you initially create it. The other slots are overall slot. I haven't used that one very much. Center point slot, also haven't used that one very much. 3-point arc I've used, and the way that the 3-point works is you're going to place your first point, your second point, and then the way that the arc is going to look, and then the thickness of the slot. And then it will give you a arced slot, just like that. And then center point arc slot, essentially the 3-point arc and the center point arc is the difference between those two. Result is the same, information that you input is different, and that is the same exact thing as the center point arc versus the 3-point arc. Okay, splines. That is the next thing that's pretty important to know how to use. And the way that these kind of work is a little different depending on which mode you choose. So there is the fit point spline and the control point spline. So what I'll do here is I'm going to just start clicking points. And I'll hit OK. And then I'm going to do the same spline. And I'm going to go to the same points. So you can kind of see the difference between the two. Okay, so that is 1 and that is 2. And they're sharing the same points, point placement. And you can see the difference there between the two. So depending on how used you are to creating splines, what software you've used before, if you've never used a software before, I would recommend just going with the, I think it's the fit point spline. The control point spline is just a little bit harder to use and it doesn't quite make as much sense. The fit point spline is the much better way to go. So with this, you click and you can see how it moves based on how I place my points. If I place 2 points really close together, you see how it kind of creates like a knot almost there versus like big sweeping curves. And then in the end here, after I've completed and I've hit OK, I get these green handles that show up, and that will allow me to adjust stuff after the fact. So these handles here, again, this is something that I can't quite teach you how to use necessarily. It's something that you kind of figure out with playing over time. So for example, for me, the first time that I encountered handle spline geometry like this was when I learned how to use Photoshop and Illustrator. So I had quite a bit of experience using these before I'd even started 3D modeling. And so that helped with it, of kind of learning how to make curves go where you want them to go and how to manipulate these handles to get the effect that you're trying to go for. And for you guys as new designers, it'll just take learning and tweaking and practice, 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 essentially. The most annoying thing about using splines in a modeler like this is the fact that it will never be fully defined unless you define every single aspect of every single spline, which is entirely frustrating. So what I would recommend that you do, and I would only recommend that you do this with spline geometry, is to get it where you want it to, maybe even use some construction lines to get like an idea of how big something is. You know, if you wanted to know what that area is right there, it's 400 millimeters. So you're like, oh, that's way too big. So then I'm gonna take this and bring it down. So you grab that spline and you bring this way down. Use it for that, and then when you're happy with it, I would recommend just taking the whole thing and then fixing it. That way you can't accidentally drag and misplace things, and it's completely stuck. And then if for some reason you need to change this handle here, just unfix that handle. I guess in this case I'll have to unfix everything. Just take the whole thing, unfix it. Is it not gonna let me unfix it? Let's try that again. Take that. There we go. And I should be able to move stuff now. There we go. And so yeah, that's kind of how I would recommend going about that. At least when it comes to splines, just go with the fixing instead of trying to dimension every aspect of it. Conic curves. This is when you want to try to create curves that are not your average looking curve. Conic curves do not have the same sort of properties as a normal radiused curve or even an arc, because arcs will try to be very cut and dry. You've got a center, you've got an arc, and it has a very nice radius that tries to follow along that. If you want a different type of arc, one that you can actually, as you can see here, I'm kind of like squishing it down and messing with this value here. It kind of behaves almost like a single point independent spline in a way. So that is the conic curve, and that is one that you will use occasionally in very specific cases. So just keep that in mind. Points create sketch points. So if I've got a line here and I want to create a sketch point on that line, will that split it? No, but it will give it a point on that line. So if I wanted to have something to snap to, would that snap to it without that point? Yes, it will, just like that. The reason why you might add a point is you can use points for different types of features and things. One of the things that I do with points is I sometimes use them for information on other sketches. So, for example, if I've got some sort of feature here that's round like so, and I want to know on this line where this is, what I might end up doing is I might have something like this, and then I actually go ahead and add a point at the ends of those that show up as points there that can be seen from different sketches. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense right now, but it should make sense a little bit later in the context of multiple sketches, which we'll get to. Text is super cool. Text is where you can actually create text that is actually able to be made into shapes and things. So super helpful for when you're making embossed or engraved text on your products. Here, and it pops up the command options for it, or the input options. So the text or text on path, in this case this is just straight up text. If I wanted to, I could draw a curve or some sort of line, and I could have the text follow along that line. And then the text here, we'll just have it say test. Sure, we'll leave it Arial, bold, and you can see it show up. It's very small at the moment. So let's go ahead and make that 100. There we go. There's test. And I can even rotate it here relative to itself. This is where you are rotating it from. You can change the alignment of it, if it's centered, left, right, up, down, bold, italicized, whatever. And then you can take something like this and you can turn it into a solid feature, which is kind of the whole point of it, is because you can actually extrude that out and make that into 3-dimension. So that's the whole point of this, of using the text feature, is to be able to extrude that stuff out. And then I'll just quickly show here, if I were to draw a curve like so, and then do text on path, select the path, and you can see it barely showing up there. Oops, not that many. There we go. And here's my alignment here. You can see I'm adjusting how that fits relative to the line. I want it above or below. You can do fit to path, so it'll stretch it out all along the path, or just have it be kind of squished up there. If you want to mess with the spacing, you'll have to do it in your text there, and then hit OK, and then again that can be extruded out just like before. So that's the text tool. Not going to talk about that one. We don't really use that. Mirroring I've already talked about. Circular patterns and rectangular patterns, I'm going to talk about those a little bit later when we talk about some of the other features, because I don't want to overwhelm you with too many new things. So for now, we'll just leave it at that with those new in-depth look at the sketch tools and the modify tools. That pretty much covers everything that's in this in the sketching environment. And that's most of what we're going to cover. There's 3D sketches that we'll look at later, and then there is the patterning, which is sort of a circular patterns and rectangular patterns show up at multiple different levels. So it's sketching, solid surfaces, all of those assemblies. The patterning mechanism is the same. So I'm going to show that a little bit later when we get to talking at a little bit higher level. So for now, we're just going to focus on the sketch. And my book closed on me, so I'm just going to reopen back up to that page. And I'm going to go ahead and sketch this part out here as just another example to kind of give you just a little idea of how to sketch some of this stuff out. So for starters, I'm going to start with a construction line. I'm going to just make this vertical. And I'm going to just freehand as best I can. I'm actually going to freehand half of it and then mirror it across. So change that back to normal. It's something like that, and this is going to go all the way across, and this is going to go like this. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to make this, the midpoint of this line, coincident with this. So I'm going to do a midpoint of this and that. There we go. Midpoint of this and that. And so that way this line is right smack dab in the middle of this object here. Then I'm going to create a mirror, and I'm going to select these objects here on the left. And I'm just selecting them with my left mouse button there. I'm not going to select this one because this one's going all the way across. I'm not going to select that one, but I do want to select those. The mirror line is going to be my construction line, and I'm going to hit OK. Okay, so there now you can see the left side is mirroring, or the right side is mirroring everything that I drew on the left side. I've got one other feature I need to add here that's going to mirror, and actually technically I've got this as well. Got like a little, this almost looks like a Pac-Man ghost sort of thing here. I'm going to do the same kind of thing there. And here is maybe a good example of using the sketch point. I'm going to actually add a sketch point there and add a sketch point there. Then I'm going to do the midpoint to line to point, line to point. And so that way we've added those points just as a means of midpointing. The reason for this is if I just do a line to line midpoint, I have had in the past where it gives me grief. See right there, it made this line go to the midpoint of this line. It basically made them do an exact intersection, which was not what I wanted. So that's why I added those points in to give me a little bit more accurate with those. So go ahead and mirror it again. This one, this one, this one. Mirroring across that. Hit OK. And again, if you're wondering how I know what to mirror, essentially I am mirroring something that there needs to be a complete opposite existence of it. In the case of these lines, they are simply one entity that is stretching across the mirror. So I do not need to mirror those. I only need to mirror these lines, which are complete isolated entities on the left side of this line and the right side of that line. This one also needs to get mirrored. So I'm going to go ahead and take that one, mirror it across that, hit OK. There we go. So far, so good. So now it's behaving mostly like I'd like it to. Everything else I'm pretty much going to do with dimensioning. So for starters, I'm going to assign this a value of 30. So it looks like everything is this is about to get a bit smaller. So I'm going to kind of just preempt that. Just kind of bring everything down a little bit there. And this value is going to be 10. And my drawing here has a bunch of duplicate dimensions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best to avoid that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, since this line equals 10, and the reason I know that this line equals 10 is because this value, depending on how you look at it, is saying this distance from this line to this line equals 10. But that also means that this line equals 10. So it applies to both. However, it does not tell me how long this line is. So if you can see here, I can move that because it does not say how long that is. So if I make this line and this line equal, it will make this line the same length as this one, and I will also make this one the same as this one. Okay, so now this line, and this line are all equal to 10 per my drawing. And I will also go ahead and assign the value of 10, make that equal to this one. And again, I've got to do some readjusting here. Bring that down, bring that down, bring that down. Because again, I'm basing this off of my drawing that I've got in front of me, so I have an idea of how big it's supposed to be. And let's see, what else? We need the height of this line here is equal to 40. Now, if you notice, something I did right there was I selected the line, then I selected the dimension tool, and that will automatically go straight to dimensioning the last line that I selected. The opposite of that is, of course, selecting the dimension tool, then selecting that line. Either way works. Make that 40. And as for this sloped portion, the way that we're going to measure that is with an angle. So to measure an angle, you need to select two lines, like so. And there are multiple different ways to measure that angle, whether it is the inside angle, or the outside angle, or the inside-outside angle, however you want to refer to those. Basically, you'll very rarely use that. You will use this one, and you will use this one. This kind of outer extreme angle here, I've seen very few uses for that. Inside angle here is supposed to be 45. So I entered that. And what does that tell us? Oh, one more thing. From here to here, and this time I selected points. You could also select the line and then drag out to the left. There's two different ways of measuring that one. So again, it's either point to point, drag, or select the entire line. And if I come out parallel to it, it will give me that parallel dimension. Or if I come out to the left, it'll give me that linear dimension. That value is going to equal 10. So there you can see my outside is fully defined, and we know this because it's turned black. So now we just need to define our inside. So the first thing is the center of this circle is horizontal to this point. So to assign that, I'm going to click the point on the left, hold Control, click the center of the circle, then I'm going to select horizontal and assign that. The second thing is the top point here and the center are vertical. So I'm going to click those, hold Control, select both, and then hit horizontal. Then I'm going to grab the sketch dimension, and I'm going to dimension this circle to have a diameter of 10. So again, the reason that this circle has turned black is because it is fully constrained, and it's fully constrained because I've told it its diameter and where it's located relative to the X and Y. And the reason is because the center is horizontal to this point, and the center is horizontal or is vertical relative to this top point. Okay, now for this one, this line is equal to 10. So I'm going to just keep using the same line here of making it equal. And this line is also 10. So I'll make that one equal. And this line is equal to 10. And the reason I keep referring back to that same line every time is because that is the line that's actually dimensioned. If for some reason I were to say this line is equal to this line and make those equal, what'll happen when I delete this line is this line will lose its reference to that previous line. However, if I make this line equal to the original line that has the dimension, and I delete this line, this still maintains its same value. And this kind of comes around to some of the overall just kind of how you do things and things that you learn over time of how to be more proactive and thinking ahead of how things might change. And that's just from experience, that's why I do something like that. Is so if I'm changing one dimension, so let's say I make this 12, everything updates to be 12. And if I make this 10, it all goes back to 10 because it's all referring to the same dimension there. So that's why I do that. Let's see here. What else do I need to do? I need to assign a dimension of the bottom of this to here. That value is equal to 5. And lastly, the bottom of this whole thing relative to the bottom here is 15. Okay, so now the whole thing is black, everything is hunky-dory, it's all happy. And now we get to talk about one other thing, which I said that I was going to talk about basic 3D tools. And by that, I really mean I'm just going to talk about one basic 3D tool. Is the most used 3D tool that you will be using. And that is the Extrude command. So I'll go ahead and rotate my view here so I can see this little flat in the 3D space. So this is the shape that I've just drawn. I'm still in the sketch space. If I do my little drop down, you can see here that I've got the lock. That tells me I've fully defined my sketch, so I'm good to go. I can click Finish Sketch, and then I can move on to my Extrude. Or, while I'm still in the sketch, I can go into the Solid panel and click Extrude. What the difference between the two is that if I do it this way, what it will do is it will place me directly into the Extrude command with the sketch that I was just working on. Otherwise, if I hit Finish and then I select Extrude, the first thing it wants is a profile. And that's okay. Two different ways of doing it. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish and if you know what it is that you're doing. So in this case, we'll go ahead and just continue as is. So I've finished my sketch, I hit finish, I've now clicked extrude, and now our extrude menu pops up. What does all this mean? The first thing it's asking for is what profile do I want to extrude? And the reason it's asking that is because, especially in reference to this sketch that I've just drawn, I actually have several enclosed profiles. I've got the main outer one, and then I've got these two circles here. And then I've got this little mouth. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I actually only wanted to extrude the circles. So what I would do is I would select one circle, and then select the other. And then you'll see there it says 2 selected. Let's just say I want to do the mouth as well. So that's 3 selected now. The next thing that pops up is the profile plane. And this is in reference to where we're starting our extrusion. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag that arrow out so you can see what it is that we're doing. In fact, I'll actually drag it this way towards us. Actually, it makes a little more sense going the other way, just for now. So I've just dragged that out a distance of 33, and that distance of 33 is implying 33 from where we started and where that profile was initially drawn. You can, however, offset the plane, and I can offset it, say, 33. And what that will do is that will start my extrusion 33 millimeters from where I initially drew it. And the reason that you do something like this is in some cases you might draw everything on your main front plane here, but in order to place it correctly, you have to offset your distance. This is totally normal. It happens a lot. Just know that that exists. You can also have it, if there was an existing object, you could also offset it from the object rather than just the plane. But for now, we're going to stick with the profile plane, as that is what most of your extrusions will be. This here is if for some reason you wanted to add a draft to it. And what a draft means is you can notice here it starts with the profile and then slowly gets bigger, or the opposite is it slowly gets smaller. Again, this is a design feature. Should you choose to want to add that to your object, that is how you can do that. They call it here a taper angle, and it says -5 degrees. If you put that back to 0, oops, just gonna right click there and go back to editing it. If you hit 0, that'll just put it back to normal, which is, again, most of your extrusions will be normal. Moving back up here, under the start, the direction is either one side, two sides, or symmetric. One side is what we currently have selected, so it either goes one way or the other way, like so. If I do two sides, I can do one side a certain amount and the other side a certain amount, and I can specify exactly how far I want each side to go. And you can see here side 1 and side 2 shown up. I can type in the distance. I can even have them taper at 2 different amounts. So I could have this one tapering out and this one tapering in if I wanted it to. It defaults to 5, so we'll do like -1. Just like so. And again, it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish, what the end goal is that you're looking to make. So I'm going to put that back to 0, put that back to 0. And then I'm going to change this from two sides to symmetric. And what symmetric does is it essentially just goes the same amount of distance both sides. But the important thing to note here is the measurement when you're talking about symmetric. And the measurement is referring to how it is measuring 30 millimeters. 30 millimeters right now is referring to the half length, meaning from the center, which is the profile, is 30 millimeters out to here. If I wanted the overall to be 30, meaning from the outside edge to the outside edge, then I need to change that measurement to whole length rather than half length. So those are those two options there. And then we get down to distance, which is our actual input value. And again, if you've noticed, there's stuff both up here, and they're just redundant. So I can type it in here, I can type it in here, I can drag it here, I can drag this, and those will just adjust these values. So for now, I'm going to be just doing a from profile plane, one-sided. I'm going to have it go this way, a total of, say, 30. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change this, and I'm going to go ahead and deselect those, and I'm going to select the correct one, which is just this one here. Notice what it does with those other profiles. It actually hollows them out and treats them as if there was nothing there, so it goes around them. If for some reason I wanted to add in one of these, let's just say that, I could add that to the selection and it would fill it in, just like so. So just know that that's how that's working. So again, while we're here selected a profile, I can select and deselect that, just like that. As soon as I start messing with something else, sometimes it gets a little hairy. Looks like it's still letting me select and deselect, so that's good. We'll go ahead and leave it as we're intending to. Going to go ahead and extrude it 30 millimeters. The last thing to talk about here is operation. And currently the options are new body, intersect, cut, and join. And the thing that we're going to be dealing with right here at the start is just a new body. And so when I'm going to hit OK on that, it will generate a new folder that gives me a body, which is what this three-dimensional object is it's considered a body. So we have our sketch, which the body is based on, and then our body. And again, if we look down here at the timeline, we can see our timeline of events. I created a sketch, and then I created a body based on that sketch. So if I want to go back and edit my extrusion, let's say I wanted to make it 33 instead of 30, I can right-click it down here, edit feature, go to my distance, change that to 33, hit OK, and now it's updated. I can also right-click, edit my sketch, change this value to 12, hit finish, and you can see that my 3D geometry has updated to match the changes in the sketch. I decide I don't like that, I want it to go back, right-click, change that back to 10, hit finish, it's updated. Go back here, edit this. Maybe I want it to be symmetric 33. Maybe it's symmetric 30. Hit OK. And now it's symmetric 30. Okay. That is the most of what I wanted to be talking about. Your exercises are going to be pictures of models that contain a sketch next to them. And your job for this week is going to be to draw those sketches and then extrude each one of them. It does not give you a value for how far they're supposed to be extruded, so just use your best judgment and eyeball it to get it as close as possible. None of them are tapered, they're all just straight extrusions. There are 3 exercises, and I will be uploading those as an assignment here in just a little bit. So that's what we're going to be working on. The features within Extrude I will talk about as we proceed forward next week. Joining, cutting, intersecting, dealing with multiple bodies. We'll be talking about that next week. But for now, that's all that I've got for you. So let me know if you've got any questions, and hopefully this all made sense. And if it did not, or you've got a question on your exercise or something, just let me know. But until then, have a good week.